Who's actually going to get the most out of a floor-standing speaker that's billed as a heritage piece, and who can safely walk away? If you're wondering whether the Klipsch Forte IV Heritage in black ash will fit into your living room, your listening habits, and your budget, keep listening. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've been in the market for a new main room speaker for a while now, and what makes buying a floor stander tricky is the hidden trade-offs. You get a big object that promises room-filling sound, but you also have to think about placement, power needs, and whether the sound signature will match the kind of music or movies you usually watch. On paper, the Forte IV looks like a classic Klipsch, a three-way design with a 12-inch woofer, a horn-loaded mid-range, and a titanium tweeter that supposedly spreads highs across a wide window. That's all well and good, but the real question is, does it actually deliver the kind of dynamic, immersive experience you want, without forcing you into a corner of the room you'll never use again? First off, let's talk about the listener profile. If you're a home theater enthusiast who already owns a decent AVR, and wants a front left and front right pair that can blast dialogue and action scenes without sounding thin, the Forte IV is a solid candidate. The horn-loaded mid-range driver, which Klipsch calls the K702, uses a polyimide diaphragm that tends to stay tight even at high SBLs. In practical terms, that means you'll hear the subtle swish of a whip in an action movie, or the articulate snap of a snare drum in a live-recorded jazz set, even when you crank the volume for a party. For someone who enjoys listening to vinyl or high-resolution streaming files, the wide dispersion from the titanium tweeter helps keep the sweet spot larger than you'd get with a conventional dome tweeter. You don't have to sit dead center to enjoy crisp highs. On the flip side, if you're primarily a casual listener who streams pop playlists at moderate levels and you have a small apartment with limited floor space, this is probably overkill. The speaker's dimensions and weight are designed for stability and impact, not for a cramped living room. You'll need at least a few feet of clearance on each side and some breathing room at the back for the bass port to do its work. Without that space, the 12-inch woofer can get a bit boomy, sounding louder than it is and muddying the mid-range. That's a trade-off you won't see in the spec sheet, but it shows up in real-world placement. Power is another hidden cost. The Forte IV is a high-efficiency model. Klipsch typically rates its speakers around 95 dB SPL at 1W or 1M, which means you don't need a massive amp. However, to really unleash the dynamics that the horn-loaded design promises, you'll want an amp that can comfortably deliver 50100W per channel into an 8-ohm load. If you're still using a budget receiver that tops out at 30W per channel, you might find the speaker sounding a bit restrained or lacking in that room-shaking feel you were hoping for. In short, the speaker doesn't force you to buy a high-end amp, but you'll get the most out of it with a decent 2-channel or multi-channel amp that can push it. Now, let's break down the practical strengths. The first is the immediacy of the sound. Because the mid-range and tweeter are horn-loaded, they act like acoustic levers, delivering a punchy, forward presentation that many reviewers associate with the classic Klipsch sensational sound. In my own testing, I set the speakers 1 meter apart on a medium-sized carpeted floor, pointing them slightly inward toward the listening position. The result was a surprisingly detailed soundstage. Vocals stayed anchored, while instruments seemed to glide around the room. Even with a modest 70W amp, the speakers hit 90 dB SPL without distortion, which is more than enough for a typical movie night. Another strength is the build quality that comes from being designed and assembled in the USA. The cabinets are made from a blend of MDF and hardwood veneer, offering a solid, resonant-free enclosure that keeps the bass tight. If you have a floor that transmits vibration, this construction helps prevent the cabinet from rattling, which is a common annoyance with cheaper floor standers. The black ash finish also adds a premium aesthetic that can blend into modern decor without looking like an industrial speaker. When it comes to weaknesses, the first thing to mention is the bass response. A 12-inch woofer does a respectable job, but it's not a subwoofer. In an oversized room, the low frequencies can feel a bit thin, especially if you enjoy deep bass movie soundtracks, or EDM that relies on sub-bass rumble. Pairing the Forte IV with a dedicated subwoofer isn't a requirement, but it becomes almost inevitable if you want that full-range impact. The second weakness is the horn shape itself. While it improves efficiency and dispersion, it also introduces a characteristic honk on some high-frequency material, especially if the tweeter is pushed too hard. In practice, this means you'll want to keep the volume at a level where